I am your host, Steve Schmidt, host of One No More. No more. We are done. And I think this is around episode 8 or 9 or 10. I wish we had it perfect and we were like, this is episode 11. And this is the debut of the future of the revenue model. But we're not going to overpromise and then deliver because then we'd just be like everybody else in the revenue world. So welcome to the Magnetic Podcast, where we keep it as real can get. Probably more enemies than friends, but that's okay. People dig our vibe. And that's kind of what we're set out to do, is so we can align with companies. We want to take that, I guess, let's call it a vibe, like whether it's their personal brand or their company brand, and they can get that out there and right now put it out in a sea of not only a world that is completely fucked up and distracted for like all these terrible reasons, and people are distracted anyways, but also in a normal time, which whenever the last time that has been, it's hard enough to get people's attention. And we talk about bringing that sort of out from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional and a lot of buzzwords. But today we're going to drop the acronyms and the buzzwords and get to know Bryan. Bryan is my co-founder. Bryan Grover is someone who I sought out without knowing. About, I suppose, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, I was like, I can't do this company the way I want to do it alone. Bryan, I think, will tell you about some things he's learned to say and validate that data, but also maybe to see like how hard this is to do with one person. And I had 3 others, and we've doubled that staff with the same clientele. And gosh, Bryan, there's no shortage of shit, like really fun things that we've been able to unearth. So welcome not only to the former Magnetic Podcast, meaning we got to name it now. So maybe by the end of this, we'll come up with a name as we relaunch our podcast, because Bryan and I are going to be dropping that, moving ahead as Magnetic, not Steve Schmidt, not SOS, just Magnetic. Steve and Bryan, he didn't like the title S&M. I said, I get it. So I think we're going to call it something else. Bryan, welcome to the show.
I'm thrilled to be here, and I don't feel any pressure at all to come up with a new podcast name by the time we finish speaking. So that's awesome.
Yeah. You probably do it while you're like shuffling a deck of cards, because we wind us back to probably the thing that stuck out with me when I first interviewed you was you're like, yeah, I got my start as a magician. And even then it was just sort of this, there was no nervousness to you. This was like curiosity where you kind of sat there, and I was like, wow, this guy's he's a thing. This is more than just a person who's a writer. He's like a movement. And so like walk us through that, because you got here obviously not by dumb luck in YouTube videos, but maybe you did, because it's kind of what we believe might happen.
I mean, it was dumb luck YouTube videos and probably a little bit too much emo music, but that's just me. So rewinding back to the Magic days, nobody believes me when I say this anymore, because I don't put myself into a category, introvert, extrovert, whatever. I used to be bad at talking to people. And then by luck of the draw, pardon the pun, this one was unintended. You will know when the puns are intended, audience.
Oh, you will.
So by luck of the draw, I stumbled into card magic, and it gave me this thing that allowed me to interact with people in a way that, like, there's no pressure for me, there's no pressure for them. It's just this thing that's happening, and it's almost like having a buffer on, I hate dating analogies, but that's a good example where like I started to get better at talking to people because of this third thing. Just getting started with that really taught me how to like get in touch with people.
Yeah, I was going to say this question at the end, but let's just get right into it, Bryan, because I think as we get through some questions, I'll kind of highlight some of your background.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of the magic of this is getting people with content, specifically like what I brought you in to co-found the company with and say you're over content.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew you got it, and I also knew you're capable of it, is it's really hard to change the way that people act and feel with words and images. Walk me through that. Does that seem stressful to you?
I don't think of it as stressful. We all want to simplify, as simple as it is, with how people approach a buying decision. It's also incredibly complicated, almost in an iceberg sort of way. So there's
Walk me through that. So the iceberg is like the tip, right? We're here, we see it.
Yep. So
that's the beacon.
Exactly. The tip might be a banner ad, or it might be a webinar sign up or something like that. But there's a whole bunch of things happening below the surface, both in the everybody's favorite trademarked idea of dark social. And then you've also got just the psychology of people and how they make decisions. And you've got the atmosphere that they are in. And like, let's take this from a B2B perspective, because I think that's just going to simplify things. B2C is a much shorter time from decision to purchase, or from awareness to purchasing decision than B2B.
Stop. We're gonna stop right there and double click on that, as the kids say, my homie. Let's take an L. Sorry, that doesn't make any sense to take an L, because this is
I'm
not
not
an L.
taking an L.
This is a shout out. Yeah, no L's, only dubs. But dubs is never a cool word. Anyways, tribute, sort of tip of the hat to Justin Welsh, the #1 LinkedIn creator. And we're talking about content on LinkedIn, and my God, this guy's created an avalanche of revenue. But on the back of a napkin, like, for real. I know he has a CRM, but it's not that easy. And I think that's part of what you said I want to double click into, which is, you said it's not easy like B2C, but I think for people listening, help them understand what that means and why it's more difficult, or why it's different.
How it's different is compression in the amount of time and amount of obstacles that it takes to go from, I am aware that this is a solution to a problem, to signed on the dotted line. Now, let's take B2C as an example. B2C, I see an Instagram ad that is targeted to me because I have 2 cats, and they are recently laid off from being the chief people officer and customer success officer. Is a little bit much for one of them, but I digress. I have 2 cats, and I see an ad for a cat bed. The only person that I have to get by for buying that cat bed is my girlfriend. That's the buying committee. And, if I'm championing this cat bed, it's just going to be, look at this. Isn't this cute? And she's going to say, yeah. And I'm going to be like, it's only $20. Now, we're going to bring this over to B2B and into actual.
I want to stop right there, though, because you just gave me a question. And as a marketer, I think you'd know the answer to this. I'm typically being fed one thing at a time. And so does that captive buying experience that only brings me into that, versus, call it, seeing a lot of those things? Sort of how B2C works is like, you want a cat box. I don't want to show you any others. You're now on a time clock that says your desire to get a cat box on average is 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And now we very fundamentally have to get you there and put a firm payments, because you probably don't want to pay $40. You'd rather pay $12 a month. So we're gonna get that option there. Like, it's a very different, it's an e-com model, right? It's very heavy on like little micro touches of, where'd you go, Brian? Like, come back to the cart. Like,
there's that, and there's the idea of competition, like you touched upon, Steve, about competition with different options. So Eugene Schwartz, and I come from a copywriting background, so a lot of the ways that I approach the thinking of, a consumer is through persuading through words and how those words are used on a page. Now, in the case of cat bed, I am sitting there looking at that saying, I know what a cat bed is. Now I'm just comparing different versions. And is this one that looks like my cat is being eaten by Bruce from Jaws the best one? Or is it the pineapple under the sea SpongeBob one? And so that's what Eugene Schwartz would call solution aware. Like, you are completely aware that this is the solution. These are just different options of the solution.
Now throw tech on top of that, right? Because let's say you're a Spider-Man fan.
Yep.
And it knows you like Spider-Man, and there's a Spider-Man cat bed.
Yep.
It also is using, call it, artificial intelligence, and we've been using that for years before we started talking about it and calling it ChatGPT, which is, anyways, that is also really isolated to B2C for the most part, right? Because B2B doesn't have an active listening voice to any of us.
That's changing very quickly. And the unfortunate thing is that it's changing quickly in the wrong ways and slowly in the right ways. And what I mean by quickly in the wrong ways is that personalization influx that we've seen in cold emails. If someone emails me, I went to UMass Boston, got an English degree. UMass Boston was a commuter school. I spent only 2 days a week there because I was working full time at the same time. I loved my school. I loved my professors. I don't have any affinity to the brand in the same way that someone that went to Michigan State might have a really close affinity to that school. But
that's a really good example, by the way, because if you go to Michigan State, which, by the way, they're always like the best at what they do, but who really wants to go to the northern part of Michigan to go to college and freeze your tail off and watch football and be like, this is a great time?
70,000 people can't be wrong. Or actually, are they at 100,000 people in that stadium? It's an insane amount of people, but that's where personalization is getting it wrong today. And that's where a lot of marketers are, is they're just plugging and playing in these sequences. And they're saying, oh, hey, here's a relevant fact about you. But we're missing a huge part. And this is where we get back to that idea of why is it so hard to get people motivated to action? It's because we're not motivating them. Like the motivation is missing. If someone comes after me in that UMass Boston, hey, you're a beacon, I'm going to be like, cool, you pulled that out of a database. Good on you. Whereas someone that has a real tie to their alma mater is going to take action based on that information. And it's just,
Are they though? Does colleges still work? I feel like that's kind of played out.
it is, but for the purposes of the idea, it's just like there's two different ends of the spectrum of like whether or not you would take action on that idea. Or
I understand.
In this case, if we're going with the cold email example, whether or not I feel like the person really knows me. And in the case that they use my college, I would say you really don't know me, because otherwise you would have used Batman or Jaws or coffee, not my college, because as much as I loved it, like I said, it doesn't have an emotional resonance. And that's really the important part there, is the emotional resonance.
If I had the cheat code, it would be, how do I get an Instagram-like platform onto B2B where people want to go there all day? They want to get distracted. They might want to buy things. And let's say it was Instagram for business. LinkedIn's kind of doing that, right? But I don't feel like it's grabbing transactions in real time. It's this funnel of who are we? What space do we fit in? Oh, by the way, here's who we are again. And there's so many DMs, and my God, it is like a slaughterhouse CRM. And my God, how many users are on LinkedIn? And everybody's like, well, there's only, 800 million users on there. I'm like, oh, that's it. That's all. This is the biggest social media platform. And a lot of us who had success on it, Bryan, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, some of us have started, you and me, a company out of that, right? Others kind of came in and out of it when, man, that's hard. That's hard to sustain. Like, holy crap. Like, I know you said it's great to create your own content, but Bryan, you didn't tell me it was going to take 10 hours a day. And you didn't tell me I had to engage with people in the comments. My God, I got to run a company. And I think like everybody wants that. And they go, yeah, the content, like get the podcast. Now we're all like, great. Everybody has a podcast. Everybody's 2D. Like, great. Who gives a shit? When everybody's tried and true this, like, yeah, get some people on, try and close them in a podcast, like send some outbound emails. And we're all sitting here waving our hands going, hey, it's not working. Like, it's not working. And now it's getting deafening because we're like, it's not working. It's been 2 years. It's not working. It's been 3 years. But yet people are hiring revenue consultants at scale to try and fuel predictable revenue. And it's like, damn, the car just shove it off the cliff already, right? And just burn it to the ground. Because what you're saying is that certainly does not change the way that people are going to act and feel. Is probably not coming from a cold email or a cold call. Or is it? Because it worked 5 years ago, worked 6 years ago.
There's a lot of good points there about what's working, what's not. My experience on both sides of the fence. Now, I did my time in the marketing ops trenches. I did my time buying as a marketing ops specialist, because that was just where I was at that point in my career. I was doing something a little bit different than the writing gig. There's kind of a bunch of different competing factors there. One is that we've seen massive proliferation in the amount of solutions to a single problem. Real quick, Steve, name 3 sales engagement platforms.
Salesloft, Outreach, Mailshake.
Name another 2.
Lemlist. Apollo.
Yeah. So right there, you have 5
Gosh, that's the business we're in. And I'm like, wow. Well, those guys have all been around for like 6 years. My gosh, there's so many new people.
Right. Absolutely. But like, let's dig into that idea right there. You just named 5 solutions off the top of your head in less than 5 seconds. If you were a new leader at an organization and you knew that this is a problem that you were going to have, the first thing you would do is make that list of 5 items. And you would say, okay, these are the 5 that I know are good. Person that works below me, go investigate these 5. There's not going to be a G2 search about that. There's not going to be Google search of top sales engagement platforms. And this is the world that we're entering into right now, which is the power of the buyer. And at this point, Steve, you've got decades of selling experience. You've been here before. You don't need to ask Google or Bing or Alexa or Siri who you should go to for sales engagement. You know what you've tried that works. You know what people are talking about that sounds really cool. and you already have this idea of the marketplace. And the point that I'm getting to here is that what is happening in a marketplace in B2B tech especially is that you've already lost if you're not in the conversation 6 months before they're starting to think about buying you. Like if 1% of your customer base is in market at any given time, it's less than that, because that 1% that's in market is making a list in a Google Doc and assigning that out to their like direct report and saying, have at it.
Okay. So let's go there. Double click into it on content. So they make a list, and we all know, like, oh, dark social. They're going to go to maybe G2, maybe some sort of validation, probably not platform. But they're probably going to ask some people, but they really don't want to go talk to 5 people, do they?
Absolutely not. If
That's like the one thing they'll delay.
Yep.
Like, oh shit, I got to go meet with 3 people. I'd rather just go with one, get a bid, and say, like, hey, I'll get some quotes, and I need you to match it.
But pausing right there, this is an immediate loss for any of the, like, let's say there was 10 solutions on that list. There's an immediate loss. Most companies are still saying, well, it depends for what their pricing is. You're off the list because I don't want to go talk to someone. And these are all of these weird one-off things. And I guess what I'm getting at is, like, predictable revenue model talks about being predictable. But these are all things that, like, how do you predict for which 10 items end up on someone's list? Which solutions are a fit budget-wise? In some cases, a MailChimp might be the right email platform for the right company.
Yeah.
MailChimp isn't going to be competing. MailChimp is just going to be doing what MailChimp does, which is have a really solid email platform and just keep on keeping on. And as long as you're using it within their terms and conditions, blah, 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 that'll probably be fine for some people. But it's trying to put things into a predictable, like, this is clearly how people are going to act. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that, like, there are so many factors that that are confounding that can affect this process.
Let's get down to the dirty here. We're going to make you judge people. Who is doing content the best right now as an executive leader versus the brand? Because I want to stay away from the brand because we're talking advertising money. And that's, to me, it's maybe unfair. So who is it and why?
I think that a lot of the leaders have continued to be the leaders, but the longer, and this is the group that I'm not going to name because this is where I get roasted on LinkedIn if I start naming names. But I think the longer you stay a leader, the more pressure there is to stay a leader. And there's less leaps of faith given. But there's one person that comes to mind that there's 4 things that I think about their content. It makes me stop. If I see his face next to a post, I will stop. It makes me think. It challenges an area that I feel like I could use improvement on. It usually makes me laugh because of, honestly, point number 4. This person is completely themselves. They show up as their geeky self on LinkedIn. And
Is this Rand?
Kevin Rapp.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
I don't know Kevin Rapp.
He's fantastic. He is the head of his own consultancy that I'm totally not Googling right now to make sure that I cite him.
Kevin Rapp. Let's judge Kevin in real time. RAPP?
RAPP, yep.
Chief Creative Officer and crafts scroll stopping, high performing content to build lasting brands from Columbus, Ohio.
That's him.
He looks like Jonah Hill from Superbad, sort of.
He's got a Seth Rogen vibe to him as well. It's like a mix between the two.
Okay, cool. And you like it because you learned things. Now, have you ever bought anything from him?
Not yet.
Okay.
Mostly because
what would he sell to you?
He is a creative director and visionary on the kind of visual storytelling side of the fence. So, like, if we were in the place to have the budget to do something completely bananas, that list that we were talking about before of, like, hey, who do you think that is in your network that can solve this problem? If you said to me, Steve, like, hey, we need something and we've got the dollars to throw behind it, who do you think that we should go after? I wouldn't ask anyone. I would just go to the people that I've seen their work. And there's a couple more on that list in the creative directive fields. Gons Villos, formerly of Alice. He's fantastic. And the reason that the designer side of things is coming up a lot is because I'm a writer, not a designer. And I know my weaknesses. Few is as they are. I guess the lesson to be learned there is the same things that keep coming up time and again when it comes to influencer marketing. And
Yeah.
that's a couple things. One, show up as yourself.
What does that mean though? Because I think we hear that, but I'm going to challenge you to go tactical on that.
Mhm.
And I bet you were. So probably you're like, yep, I was going to go there. So keep going, but tell people how to show up as himself because you do.
Well, there's a quote that I always come back to. This is one of those meta examples, and I'll get back to why it's meta in a second. But Albert Camus has this idea that if you're going to show up and live an authentic life, it means that your actions have to match with your knowledge. And that means you take action on the things that you believe to be true about the world, about yourself, about what you're doing, etc. The reason that's important is it means that you're not... I saw a great post earlier this year. It was around June, and this is when LGBTQIA+, forgive me if I'm forgetting any acronyms there. I'm trying as a cis white guy. But Pride Month comes up, and, every single brand throws a rainbow over their logo. Immediately, you can look at some of these brands, and especially if this is a viewpoint on the world that impacts your way of life, you're going to know which brands are actively supporting equality regardless of how you present or any number of things with, the LGBTQ community.
Let's back it up. I'm going to do this to you on purpose.
Sure.
I'm going to drive you nuts, but I'm going to go through their brain. They're going, cool, LGBT. I'm talking about people. I don't really care about the brand. How am I going to find out about the people who are going to make this content versus whether or not a brand has a rainbow or a fist or something with it? Because I think as a person, how do I get started? Like, how do I go, cool, I'm going to get up tomorrow and start making content because Bryan said so. Like, I'm going to be my authentic self.
I would say make a list of the hills that you would die on. Lay them out, Bunker Hill is over here.
The biggest one, right?
Yeah.
I suppose you got to know that.
Exactly.
That's your kind of your thing, right? Yeah. Like, I'm going to die on this.
Yeah, it's right over there. I can see it. I'm kidding. I'm about 30 miles outside of the city, but no, I would say make a list seriously of the things that you would argue day in and day out. And I'll give you a couple examples of mine. I think content will always be the differentiator between two identical products. I will talk through that all day long. If you've got two CRMs, odds are the one that's going to win is the one that tells the better story. That's one of the hills for me. And so as you start to identify these hills, and these are the things that you truly, truly, truly buy into, the more you talk about them live and the more that you kind of refine your perspective, you're going to be showing up authentically. Another one for me is that there's plenty of room on a professional network like LinkedIn for pop culture reference. So I will make a movie quote reference. I mean, my post today was about The Godfather, which is one of my favorite books and movie trilogies ever. One of the hills that I would die on is that The Godfather Part 3 is not a bad movie. It's just a bad Godfather movie. Unsubscribe and cancel me now. But
yeah, right. And there's also people who personal branding, like we've heard a lot about. They call it overshare, right? But they resonate with people, and whether that's religion or their addiction recovery or their journey up and down failure, right? Like that kind of authentic self. You're saying bring it in full force. Is that right?
I think bring it in full force and see how your target audience responds. I think that sometimes, you might find an audience that you weren't looking for if you show up in full force with something that is polarizing. And politics and religion are amongst those things, believe it or not, that have been viewed sometimes as polarizing from time to time.
Are you saying to talk about religion and politics on LinkedIn?
I'm saying do that and then say that Steve Schmidt told you to do that.
Oh, yeah. That's a magnetic strategy. I was like, honestly, that's the taboo thing. And let's talk about it out loud. Is everybody's like, yeah, everything except for that. Like, be your authentic self, but leave those things at home because we want to make everybody okay, right? We want to make everybody feel in a safe place. They don't want to offend anybody. I go to Twitter. I'm offended when I log in, mostly because I can't remember my login. But the second I log in, I'm like, geez, my feelings are hurt. I won't even log into. I got so roasted on Reddit. I got took down by 800 people. And I'm like, I don't know who these people are. Like, whoa, I had a night with it, and I'm just like, fuck them. I don't give a fuck who these motherfuckers are. Sorry. Go hide behind a username on Reddit. You're probably not someone who's going to buy from me or somebody I should be concerned with. Otherwise, you'd at least take the time to call me out by name on LinkedIn and be a man about it or whatever, right? But I was just like, okay, this is interesting because that's content too, right? And when you see reputation, you see what people think of things, products, people. And now we make it even more difficult because if you have a view and I don't agree with you, and then I'm now a reference point for you, and Bryan comes up to me and says, hey, I'm going to go buy this CRM software. Do you want to buy Johnny's ABC software? I thought it was really good. And I go, I don't like Johnny's ABC's point of view on LinkedIn. I think he's loud and crass. And they go, loud and crass, that's my kind of person, right? Or they go, no way, right? So you're saying live and die on that crassness and be that, or align it with the product, or the product becomes that, or is it all encompassing? Is it all the same damn thing?
To clarify on the showing up, like touching on the religion and politics thing first and foremost, most of us have pretty ingrained, and this is a whole different psychological conversation. Most of us have pretty ingrained ideas of what we believe in ethically and morally. Trying to convince someone to change their mind is a very uphill battle. Now, if it's something that you truly believe in, I think there's a consideration of what are you trying to accomplish? And this is why I brought up the idea of hills that you will die on.
Gary Vee doesn't give a fuck, does he? Gary Vee's just fucking, he'll say anything. Whatever happened to him, we were all in, like religion and fuck it and say this and say that. Now everybody's like, wait a second. Did we drop the F-bombs?
The people that are offended by profanity are going to continue to be. But I don't know that Gary Vee, as an example, I think the audience that he has been gathering over the years is that contrarian, like down with this is the way things were.
Yeah.
But I don't know that he necessarily is convincing anyone to cross over.
Most people don't know what he does. And you would argue if I said to you, what does Gary Vee does? They'd say he's a speaker, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe he does some wine. He flips garage sales, but most people don't even know that he has a content agency called VaynerMedia, and they do okay, right? They're not huge. They're not. Mark Cuban wouldn't probably buy them, but yeah, Gary Vee gets so much press. How much money does Gary Vee make a year?
Let's find out.
$100 million. $10 million, because he not only did he go all in, and he went all in on organic, he owned every channel. He owned Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and talks about LinkedIn fondly, but quite frankly does not show up on LinkedIn. So I'm like, great, your commercials sound nice, but you're nowhere on the platform.
So he's worth 160 million or 200 million.
Props to you, Gary Vee.
I mean, nothing to sniff at, but this guy's
doing pretty good.
Yeah, he's doing fine. And if you show up in the comments, Gary Vee, hi, I like your books. You're right.
Now let's talk about a smaller version of Gary Vee, because this is another question. So while you're online Googling, there was a guy who had a similar sort of contrarian view. Chris Walker grew his company to 22 million, claiming, and really believable, right? Most of it was through his podcast, and holy shit, the energy on that, like the feeling of the movement he created on LinkedIn was dominating. And it didn't feel like there was a second player to even reference. There was no Refine Labs or this. It was Chris Walker has the answers. And I felt like people were going to pay X amount, 15 grand is their minimum, just to be able to say they were working with Chris Walker. I mean, that was a movement. Why did that succeed so well?
I think it's because of the fact that, he just posted about this a couple of weeks ago about the status quo in sales and marketing is falling apart. And the only reason it didn't fall apart sooner is likely because of the huge infusions of VC capital into the ecosystem, like especially with regards to B2B tech. Because if you look outside of...
And that's specifically who Refine Labs is working with, right? It was mostly like Series C companies.
And those companies are seeing over the long term, like there's the idea that a broken clock is right twice a day. Like, if you've got a product...
You love quotes, by the way. We got to stop. Where did you get your affinity for quotes? I love it.
Oh, my grandfather. I actually have a book on quotes that he gave me.
Is that intentional, though? Is that like if I give quotes as reference points, it will be more memorable?
I think the reason I quote so much is because of a copywriting principle that came up years later. Sorry, it just started raining outside and caught my attention.
I like
So
that. As a writer, only a writer would be like,
it's raining.
it's raining. That caught my attention.
The rain is coming down so beautifully. So I would say the reason I quote so much is because I think writing something that's already been written is a waste. I think there are certain quotes that you just come across that encapsulate an idea so clearly that I just go back to that point as opposed to trying to think about a new way to say it. And that might not be the that might not be the best path forward, but it's how I think and speak in quotes. So I guess I am the distillation of every book I've ever read.
I heard a quote this morning. I want to get your thought on it. And then we have two more questions because we got a lot more quotes and we're going to keep moving on because you're going to be the host. So people have plenty of time to get to know you. But I want to ask some really interesting, I think, questions to you that as I guess technically I'm your boss. And that kind of sounds fun to say on the podcast. So I'm going to say technically as your boss. But this is fun to talk about building a company for you because I want to know or hear you say, like, you're a first time co founder. I've only done it one time before as a single founder. What has your first 45 days, like, really, you said authentically, like, if it fucking sucks, say it. Like, what was it like at Magnetic? Because this was your first time, call it, not only running a company and finding out quickly the amount of stuff to do is never ending, but also partnering and selling into the CEO level and then sort of seeing that revenue mechanism that we talk about. So walk through with the people. I haven't heard it like this yet, so this should be entertaining for me too.
First 45 days. We're going to Tarantino this because, of course, we are. But even at its worst moments, where I'm sitting there, head in my hands, telling my girlfriend I'm stressed out and there's a lot going on and I'm overwhelmed. And she's like, "Did you make the wrong decision?" And I'm like, "No, I'm having more fun than I've had in my entire career." It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. And I guess what the first 45 days has looked like, most of what I would say the first 25 days, I've been abiding by, to go back to another quote, something that Machiavelli says in The Prince, where he says, you've got kind of two ways that you can come in as a new boss. You can come in and say, fuck all of this. You did it wrong. Wipe out everything. Restart from scratch. Now, that's a potential option. And, I bet a lot of our listeners have probably been through situations like that. And what that breeds is two things. One, a whole bunch of disruption. Two, resentment. And three, causing a whole bunch of extra work for yourself because you're coming into a situation that's already running. And so I even told Steve about
on toothpicks though. I mean, and is it easier to walk into something? I'd love to hear that, like something that's already like got legs on you. Go, oof, I want to make this my vision, or something that, let's be honest. I was standing up as a solopreneur for all intents and purposes, doing things with toothpicks, right? Google Drive, Dropbox. Here, you're like, where is everything, Steve? For a content company, holy shit, where's all the content, right? I mean, is that more difficult than walking in and changing something?
I think
Because I guess you were changing. I guess you were changing it, but I was kind of saying like, hey, I don't know what it is. I don't know exactly what it is.
there have been changes for sure, but the first thing that I was doing was starting with documenting and saying, okay, how are things working before? How has this relationship with this partner unfolded? Because this was a bedrock of our business that we relied on this external partner. How is this working right now? And we walked through it, and a couple of weeks in, the conversation came up that like, okay, I don't know that this is working just because of how the relationship is unfolded. And I don't want to go too specific because we
Of course.
love and respect the partnership and it just wasn't working for the long term. That was one example of, okay, show me how this is working today. And instead of coming in and just saying, this doesn't work, I have an idea that I've done before, I'm going to reinvent the wheel and we're just going to burn everything down and start from scratch. No, instead, my goal coming in to Magnetic as co-founder has been to look at what's being done, and much like the Ever Given, you guys remember the Suez Canal boat that got stuck, huh? How's that for a reference?
That's good.
Right?
That was
Right?
good.
So there's just a little bit of shifting and pivoting, little bits at a time, to the point that like just the last 2 weeks we're starting to see, holy hell, we're getting stuff in on time and it's low stress and our team is feeling less pressure and everybody knows what needs to get done when and then what happens.
Yeah, but does it work? Does it actually? I mean, because that's all. I mean, the end product isn't just getting project stuff done, right? I mean, you gotta are you seeing the light at the end of the tunnel that content-led selling does lead to revenue, or is that scary?
Oh, it absolutely leads to revenue. So I'm deep, deep, deep in the weeds thinking about like the process side of things, which I guess is a cast off from my marketing operations life. But we're seeing the results with our clients time and again. In order to end up on that list of, Joe Smith is sitting at home and saying, well, crap, we need a sales engagement platform. Who do we know in that space? We're helping
Yeah.
those clients make that list with every single podcast that we do, every single post that we do. We're making that sort of brand stickiness through content.
This is where I'm going to say for the marketers out there, like you get to now, you've stepped inside a little bit of the belly of the beast, right? And you've seen sort of the CRM and sort of this, oh my God, this is working. Are these dashboards right? How did that happen? And I'm sitting here going, yeah. We've been doing this for 6 months. Like this shit is working. And you're like, apparently so. And I think that is not maybe as surprising as you because you're like, yeah, that's what I signed up for. But also, I think some people go like, well, I mean, are you just making content? Because if you really can make content that sells, this is lightning in a bottle, right? Because then if I make money from sales and marketing, I should just keep spending more and more and more, right? So shouldn't we be taking off to the rocket and the moon because we're so innovative at this? Or are you finding that there's so much work to be done? We're at a very baseline level of understanding how this thing even looks.
So people making decisions is never going to be easy, especially in the B2B space where you're talking about Gartner, Forrester, Bain. One of that kind of crew has said that like the average buying committee is 8 to 10, if not 12 people for your average piece of technology. And, as I've been helping clients both in my own business before joining Magnetic as co-founder and currently, you have any piece of software, if you're not talking to IT, you're not selling anything. So if you don't have them involved in it, you're at a loss. So where this comes down to, there's a formula that Mech Labs has a heuristic about conversion. And they say that the probability of conversion is dependent on a couple of things: motivation, the force of the value proposition.
Okay, back up. So can I change motivation with writing?
Sure.
I can't create it though. Oh, that's so powerful. I just want to, if I could get anything out of this podcast, let's stop and say and I just asked you because this is the most powerful thing I've learned in writing. I cannot make them motivated.
Nope.
I can raise their motivation.
Demand
I
generation.
cannot create it out of nowhere.
Demand generation is the biggest misnomer in marketing history.
Sounds nice.
We've seen it in history.
So you go create that demand at the bar when you walk around. Like, are you going to go create demand?
I mean, I usually do, but at that point, the bartender says, please put your shirt back on.
I'm not desperate. I'm creating demand. Like, but that was the whole idea of demand.
I'm going to try that one next time, but to
I'm going to dress up like demand generation for Halloween, and I'm just going to be, I don't know, but it's going to be fun. Can you help me?
I'm going to be my former manager, who was the best I ever saw in this business. So, Andrea, you're awesome.
What do you attribute everything to, by the way? I mean, we're clicking into this, so let's just get a little messy with it. Like, who taught you, like, the thing that you needed to leap over the fence? But besides just like, I'm a talented writer, I think I'm pretty good, to like, I'm a talented writer and I could be really fucking good.
Honestly, I would say, and this is a, cliched Oscars acceptance speech, but my parents, they taught me to always be seeing the people at the end of the line. So whatever was going on, my dad, I learned a bunch of things watching him, and just, you pick up things from your parents. But the one bit of advice that he gave me was be nice to everyone. It wasn't said in such a way that he was saying, like, you never know when you'll need to ask for a favor, so you might as well be in their good graces. But he would say, I don't care if you were talking to the CEO or the custodian, be nice. It's the cheapest thing you can do to make someone's day. And you never know when that might come back around. And it proved to be correct And I'll give you a quick anecdote that explains this. It was my first real adult job, like had to wear a collared shirt every day sort of job. And I was in college and I forgot my laptop at work. And I had just witnessed the head of IT laying into another colleague about leaving her laptop unlocked and not in a drawer, and how dare you. So it's 2 a.m. and I'm showing up at the office to try to get in.
Oh my God.
And who's the person coming to unlock the door for me but the custodian who I'd made friends with? And I was like, Rosa, how are you? Sorry, I'm here at 2 a.m. and you're answering my call. And she's like, oh, anything for you. And it's one of those things where when you recognize, and this is one of those things that marketers are getting better at lately, because I think we went through.
Is it called working?
Working is working is something marketers are still working on.
No. Marketers are going to hate me on this podcast. Sorry. Oh boy.
So marketers for probably from the early aughts, whatever the 2000s were called, through the 2010s.
Dark ages.
Dark ages. So through the dark ages of this millennium, they're the darkest that we've seen so far.
Dark social.
We've seen that having all of these names means in our database, in our CRM, in our marketing automation platform, having all of these data points means absolutely nothing if we're not seeing the people at the end of it. And that's what I think is changing, but it's hard. It's hard to do at scale. And frankly, for a company to sustain itself, it needs to be done at scale. It's just the mathematics that happens with running a business. It's hard to do at scale, and it's hard to do it right without seeming authentic. Going back to an earlier point in our conversation where if someone tries to personalize something for me and they just try to plug in some field in their CRM of what my alma mater is, it's not going to have as much of a resonation.
Does it do the opposite ever? Like, do you ever just go delete? I mean, my last question is going to be also like, this is going to be a fun one. Actually, hold on. Let me answer the question. Then we'll ask the last one before we got to wrap it up. So sorry, I asked you a question. I'll let you answer.
Which question was that?
I'm going to ask the last question. Sorry, because that's the one I was remembering in my head. So I'm going to name things, and then you say, like, based off of your familiarity with that, what you would buy and why, right? So I'm going to say, hey, I need this. Who do you know, right? All right. So Bryan, as we wrap up this last podcast with the old magnetic podcast, call it segue into the first one, I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and this will be fun. He has no idea that this was coming, and I don't know if he'll be able to accurately answer them all with people, but I'm going to say things. And then you're going to, based off of what you know of people, not companies, tell me like, check these guys out, right? So we're going to start with the first one that's easy. Who do you know that's a person that could help me find a mass email solution?
I mean, I would talk to you first and foremost, because I know that you've run organizations that have done these things.
Well, who else? Like, I'm a marketing company. Like, I got to get a marketing list. Steve doesn't know marketing. He's dumb. Like, I got to get a big cold marketing list. Who's the expert on that? You need more connections who are cold emailers.
Well, that's the thing is I would then tap into my network who are working or collaborating with organizations. So I'd be talking to Nina Butler at Reggie AI and saying, hey, you guys are a generative AI organization. You guys integrate with a whole bunch of sales engagement platforms for mass email. Who would you go with?
Boom. There you go. All right. There's that. There's that people first model popping out. All right. I'm going to ask 2 more. Let's say 2 more for time's sake. I need to go and get a cybersecurity solution because my business is growing. I got to go buy cybersecurity, make sure my stuff stays safe.
Ooh. So there's a couple of engineers that I'd worked with previously that work at end-to-end solutions. I'd probably turn to them. Their names escape me because...
Would you go there before you Googled it?
Oh, absolutely. Cybersecurity, especially in the age of GDPR, CCPA, CPRA, and all of that sort of stuff. I'm not messing around with that. I'd be looking at, if not going directly to the cybersecurity experts, I'd be looking at what does my liability look like? And I'd be talking to people that I know that are heads of global liability and privacy experts.
There we go. Last question. Who would you go to if you're going to find merch? You need merch. You need hats and shirts. This is going to be a fun game. I think we're going to add this to the podcast because, I mean, we all say we know somebody, but when it comes down to it, I think the point is it's hard to pull it out of thin air, right? If you saw their content, it'd be a little easier, right?
I have one. Bullshirt in York, Maine, because I drive by it on the way to my girlfriend's parents' house up there. And
boom,
they have great branding, and I know that they do merch.
And he knows they do, and and I think where we went there is before all that, you're not going to go to Google and find like merch places by me. You're going to think, where am I at? What Magnetic does and what Bryan's trying to do is inspire people the way they act and think. To pay money to buy a solution to change the way that they're thinking, feeling. Maybe they can solve a problem today. Bryan, this is super fun. We got so much content out of it. Do this for me. Share with everybody where they can find you. And I think I know where you're going to say. And then we're going to go ahead and then segue into get ready for Bryan and I to be co-hosting the podcast. But Bryan, in the meantime, where can they find you?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. That's /Bryan R. Grover. If you do just Bryan Grover, it will be a mechanic in Alabama who I appreciate as a human, but it's not me.
Your side hustle.
I moonlight as a mechanic in Alabama from my house here in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, as one does. The other place...
I think a great Netflix show.
Right. Yeah, connect with me on there, and that's the best place for now. And otherwise, through Magnetic, look forward to connecting with everybody.
Cool. This is no longer just me, guys. I'm Steve, and
I'm Bryan.
That's Bryan. Yeah, and Bryan and I are going to be hosting this, so we hope to be talking about content, not just my feelings on it, but our company. We think an opportunity to really help people sell with content, have fun with it, that we can guide you to know how to do that yourself, or know how to hire us to do it, or simply talk about it, hear about it, and do nothing. But at least give it the consideration and thought we believe and the impact that it can have to your business. So Bryan, thank you so much, brother. It's been so much fun. I'll give my 45 days the next time because it's been wild to watch the development. And I've been feeling a lot of joy through that. So thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate you.
Likewise, Steve. Can't wait to chat about your 45 and see how those match up.
Beautiful. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.